Welcome to our deep dive. You're looking to sharpen your focus and boost your productivity smart move in our world of endless distractions. The source you've shared with us, Erik Qualman's Focus Project, isn't your typical self-help lecture. It's more like grabbing coffee with a friend who happens to be a focus guru.
And what's refreshing is Brotman's approach. He doesn't just preach from a pedestal. He dives into his own year-long experiment, tackling a different focus challenge each month, from supercharging his business to decluttering his life.
It's like he's saying, hey, I struggle with this too, but here's what I learned, and maybe it can help you. He even compares our modern world to the boiling frog analogy. We're slowly getting used to all the distractions, but it's subtly frying our brains, hurting our relationships, and just making us less happy overall.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? And it raises the question, what are we sacrificing by letting distractions rule our lives? Are we missing out on deep thinking, genuine connections, or even just the simple joy of being present?
Exactly. And the book isn't all doom and gloom. It's packed with practical strategies like Brotman's Focus Project, where he dedicates each month to a different area of his life. He starts with business growth, which I think is a smart move. Who doesn't want a more successful business?
What's interesting is he doesn't just throw out generic advice. He uses a framework based on animal personalities to help us understand our unique focus challenges. We've got the hedgehog, afraid of failure, the squirrel easily distracted, the chameleon always conforming, and the army ant constantly overloaded. Think of it as a fun way to figure out which focus traps you might be falling into.
I can definitely see myself in a few of those. I'm a bit of a squirrel myself, always chasing shiny objects. So let's dive deeper into these personalities, starting with the hedgehog.
They're fascinating, aren't they? The hedgehog is all about avoiding failure, often over-preparing and hesitating to take action. They build this elaborate armor to protect themselves from potential setbacks.
It's like they're so afraid of making a mistake that they end up not doing anything at all. Brotman describes them as someone who dreams of being a singer but never sings in public for fear of criticism. They're basically stuck in a perpetual rehearsal, never taking the stage.
Precisely. And while preparation is important, the hedgehog's tendency to overthink and delay can be paralyzing. They need to learn to embrace imperfection and understand that failure is often a necessary step on the path to success.
Okay, so what about the squirrel? They're the ones constantly bouncing from one thing to the next, right? Always chasing the latest trends and hotspots.
Exactly. Driven by FOMO, the fear of missing out. They start a million projects, but rarely finish any card. Brotman gives the example of someone who's always aware of the hottest new restaurants, but never seems to settle into a favorite spot. They're all over the map, literally and figuratively.
Their energy and enthusiasm can be infectious, but it can also lead to scattered efforts and a lack of follow-through.
Absolutely. The key for the squirrel is learning to harness that energy and direct it towards a select few important goals they need to prioritize and resist the urge to chase every shiny object that crosses their path.
Now, the chameleon is the one who's always trying to fit in, right? They might suppress their true selves to please others or avoid standing out.
That's right. They're masters of adaptation, constantly morphing to blend in with their surroundings. Think of the person who chooses a career path to please their parents, even though it doesn't align with their passions, or someone who stays in a comfortable but unfulfilling job because it feels safe. They're always seeking approval and avoiding conflict.
It's like they're afraid to shine their own light for fear of being rejected or judged. They become a reflection of what others want them to be rather than embracing their own unique identity.
Exactly. The challenge for the chameleon is recognizing their own worth and pursuing their own path, even if it means challenging expectations or standing out from the crowd.
And finally, we have the army ant, the one who's always overloaded and taking on too much, always saying yes and never setting boundaries.
They're the ultimate doers, often driven by a sense of duty and responsibility. They thrive on being busy and productive, often juggling multiple projects and commitments at once. But this can lead to burnout, overwhelm, and ultimately diminishing returns.
It's like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they don't know how to ask for help or delegate tasks. They end up sacrificing their own well-being in the process.
Precisely. The army ant needs to learn the power of delegation, saying no, and setting boundaries to protect their time and energy. They need to understand that it's okay to ask for help, and that true productivity comes from focusing on the most impactful tasks rather than trying to do everything.
So as we delve deeper into the book, I encourage you to think about which animal personality resonates with you the most. It's not about labeling yourself, but rather gaining self-awareness and understanding your unique focus challenges.
It's a starting point for developing strategies that help you overcome your tendencies and create a more focused and productive life. And speaking of a focused and productive life, Brotman introduces a humorous but thought-provoking concept he calls the donut life.
Yes, the donut life. He uses the example of Fred the baker from those old Dunkin' Donuts commercials. You know, the guy who's so busy making donuts he can't even tell if he's coming or going. He's always on the move, but he's not really getting anywhere.
It's a brilliant analogy, isn't it? That donut life is all about going through the motions, being busy for the sake of being busy, but without a clear sense of purpose or direction. It's like running on a hamster wheel, expending a lot of energy, but not actually making any progress.
And it's so easy to fall into that trap, especially in our always-on, hyper-connected world. We're constantly bombarded with demands and distractions, and it can be hard to step back and assess whether we're actually moving towards what truly matters.
Exactly, and that's where Brotman's concept of non-negotiables comes in. He suggests identifying the things that are absolutely essential to your well-being and happiness, and then building your life around those core values.
It's about making conscious choices about how you spend your time and energy, rather than letting your schedule dictate your life. So, for example, if spending quality time with your family is a non-negotiable work, you might choose to limit your work hours or decline social engagements that interfere with family time.
It's about setting boundaries and prioritizing what truly matters, even when it means saying no to things that seem important, but ultimately don't align with your core values.
And that brings us to another important element of focus, asking the right questions. Brotman believes that asking good questions can help us gain clarity, make better decisions, and build stronger relationships.
He shares some clever examples, like asking a husband who's shopping for jewelry for his wife on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to choose something your wife wouldn't like? This forces the husband to think more critically about his wife's preferences and helps him narrow down the options more effectively.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference in the outcome.
Another example he gives is asking a potential client, what's your favorite Disney movie? This seems like a random question, but it can actually be a great way to build rapport, spark a conversation, and make the interaction more memorable.
It's about showing genuine interest and making a human connection, which can be incredibly valuable in business and life.
Exactly. And asking good questions isn't just about getting information. It's about deepening our understanding, challenging our assumptions, and ultimately making more informed choices.
Yeah, before we move on to Brotman's specific focus strategies, let's take a moment to connect this back to you. Do you ever feel like you're living a donut life? Are you constantly busy but not really making progress towards what truly matters?
And what are your non-negotiables? What are the things you absolutely will not compromise on no matter how busy you get? These are powerful questions to consider as we delve deeper into the book's practical tips and strategies. Building on that idea of non-negotiables, Brotman shares a really relatable story about his own struggle with saying no. It takes place on Christmas Eve. No less, he's up late trying to appease a demanding client, sacrificing precious time with his family.
Ouch, I can feel the stress just hearing that. It's a classic example of how we sometimes prioritize the wrong things, even when it comes to something as important as family.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how Brotman frames it in terms of the 80-20 principle. It's this idea that often 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts.
Yeah.
So we need to identify that crucial 20% and make sure it's aligned with our values.
So in Brotman's case, saying yes to that one demanding client was actually preventing him from focusing on the things that truly mattered, his family, his well-being, and even the bigger picture of his business.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is say no. And this realization leads him deeper into his focus project, his year-long experiment with dedicating each month to a different area of his life.
He goes all in on this, exploring 12 different themes. We've already touched on business growth, but he also tackles time management, relationships, health, even mindfulness.
And what I appreciate is his honesty. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He shares his struggles and setbacks, reminding us that focus is a skill you build over time, not something you magically achieve overnight.
He even talks about how his first attempt at focusing solely on sales for a month was a total flop. He only managed to stay truly focused for a grand total of 9 minutes. Talk about a reality check.
It's a great reminder that we all start somewhere, and progress isn't always linear. The key is to keep practicing, experimenting, and refining our approach. And that leads us to one of the most valuable takeaways from the book, the power of asking the right questions.
Brotman seems to have this knack for asking questions that unlock insights and help people make better decisions. He uses them everywhere in his personal life, his business, even when working with clients.
He gives this great example of using a 1 to 10 scale to gauge someone's level of interest or commitment. Instead of asking a vague question like, do you want to do this? He'll ask on a scale of 1 to 10, How likely are you to do this?
It's such a simple tweak, but it forces people to be more specific and really think about their answer.
He also emphasizes asking questions that help others find their own solutions, rather than just imposing your ideas. Like, imagine a parent trying to get their kid to clean their room. Instead of lecturing, they could ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to clean your room, and then why didn't you choose a lower number?
That's brilliant. It gets the kid thinking about why they might want a clean room instead of it just being another chore.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from external pressure to intrinsic motivation, which is far more powerful. And this technique can be applied to so many situations, from managing employees to negotiating with your partner.
Brotman also gets really creative with using questions to help people narrow their focus and overcome decision paralysis. He shares this technique he uses with clients in the jewelry industry, and it's pretty clever.
Instead of the typical, what is your wife like, he flips it and asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you know what your wife doesn't like?
I love that by focusing on what to avoid, you automatically start eliminating options and get closer to the right choice.
It's a great example of how reframing a question can completely change your perspective and lead to better outcomes.
And he doesn't just stop there. He even applies this question-based approach to sales emails, encouraging people to ditch those long self-promotional pitches and instead focus on asking a personal, thought-provoking question that relates to the recipient's interests.
Like his example of asking, what's your favorite Disney movie? It's simple, but it immediately sparks a connection and makes the email stand out from the generic marketing noise.
It's all about humanizing the interaction, showing that you actually care about the person on the other end and not just trying to close a deal.
And speaking of making things personal, Brotman dedicates a whole month of his focus project to tidying up both his physical space and his schedule.
This is where he dives deep into decluttering his closet, his garage, his file cabinets, even the fridge. It's like a total home makeover, but with a focus on creating a sense of order and intentionality.
What I find intriguing is that he doesn't just focus on the physical act of cleaning. He connects it to a deeper sense of mental clarity. It's almost like clearing out the clutter in his home also clears out the clutter in his mind.
He even shares a funny story about finally getting around to making spare keys for his house, something he'd been putting off for ages. And to make it fun for his daughters, he lets them choose the key designs.
And what were the designs?
A rainbow unicorn, a princess, and a narwhal. It just shows that even mundane tasks can be infused with a bit of joy and personality.
It's a great reminder to not take ourselves too seriously and find ways to make even the less exciting aspects of life a bit more enjoyable.
Brotman also emphasizes the importance of making our beds every morning, referencing Admiral McRaven's famous commencement speech, where he said, if you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another.
It's such a simple act, but it speaks volumes about discipline and setting the tone for a successful day. And it goes beyond just a made bed. It's about creating systems and routines that support our goals, whether it's setting up a designated workspace, scheduling time for focused work, or even just organizing our to-do lists.
And all of this ties back to a core theme that runs throughout the book, the power of making intentional choices.
Brotman argues that true focus isn't about willpower or forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about aligning your actions with your values and creating a life that reflects your priorities.
He has this interesting exercise where he suggests writing down all the things that are important to you and then ranking them on a scale of 1 to 10, both in terms of importance and how well you're currently performing in each area. It's a way to identify where there's a gap between what you value and how you're actually living.
It's about bringing awareness to those discrepancies so you can start making changes and consciously shaping your life in a way that aligns with what truly matters.
And he also encourages us to regularly ask ourselves, what would the person I want to be do in this situation?
It's a powerful question that can help us stay true to our values and make choices that move us closer to our aspirations.
Now, I want to share a story from the book that really illustrates the importance of intentional choices and how easily we can get caught up in the busyness of life without actually focusing on what's important. Brotman describes this chaotic morning where he and his wife end up arguing because their daughter almost misses the bus.
It's such a relatable scenario for any parent. The stress of getting everyone ready and out the door on time can be a real trigger. But what's insightful is how Brotman recognizes that the argument isn't really about the bus at all.
It's about the underlying stress and overwhelm they're both feeling from trying to do too much, from trying to be everything to everyone. They're both working hard and trying to be good parents, but they're not focusing on the things that matter most.
And this becomes a wake-up call for Brotman. It's a moment of clarity where he realizes he needs to recommit to his focus project. and start making more intentional choices about how he spends his time and energy he needs to start saying no to the things that are draining him so he can focus on what's truly important, his family, his well-being, and his own sense of purpose.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have choices and we can choose to let life happen to us, or we can choose to consciously create the life we want. It's really about taking control of our own narrative.
That's the essence of what Brotman is advocating for, taking ownership of our focus and designing a life that truly aligns with our values and priorities. It's not about becoming a productivity machine. It's about being intentional and making choices that support our overall well-being.
And a big part of that is understanding ourselves, knowing our strengths and weaknesses, recognizing our tendencies, and maybe even embracing our inner animal when it comes to focus.
Exactly. If you identify as a hedgehog, maybe you need to work on taking more risks and not letting the fear of failure hold you back if you're a squirrel. Maybe you need to practice staying focused on one task at a time and resisting those shiny objects.
And if you're a chameleon, perhaps it's time to stop trying to please everyone and start embracing your unique talents and passions, even if it means standing out from the crowd.
And for the army ants out there, it might be about learning to delegate, setting boundaries and saying no so you can avoid burnout and focus on what truly matters.
The book really encourages us to think about focus as a holistic practice, not just a set of techniques or hacks. It's about creating a life that supports our well-being, our relationships, and our ability to do our best work.
And speaking of doing our best work, Brotman shares an inspiring story about a CEO who made a bold decision to narrow his company's focus, even though it meant turning down potentially lucrative opportunities.
Oh, I remember this one. The company was trying to be everything to everyone, spreading themselves too thin and not really excelling in any particular area.
Exactly. The CEO recognized this and went to the board with a proposal to focus solely on serving banks and credit unions. This meant saying no to clients in other industries like airlines and food companies, even real estate developers.
It was a risky move, but it ultimately paid off big time by narrowing their focus. The company was able to streamline its operations, deepen its expertise, and ultimately double its revenue and triple its profits.
It's a powerful example of how saying no can actually lead to greater success. It's about focusing your energy on what you do best and letting go of the things that distract you from your core mission.
It reminds me of another anecdote Brotman shares about how he finally got control of his travel schedule. He was always booking flights at the last minute and ending up with expensive, inconvenient seats.
Ah, yes. He realized he was being reactive instead of proactive. So he made a simple change. He started booking his flights at least 3 months in advance. This allowed him to choose better seats and often saved him money.
It's such a small adjustment, but it made a huge difference in his overall travel experience. It's really about those small, intentional choices that add up over time.
And that brings us to a key concept that Brotman emphasizes throughout the book, the importance of identifying and prioritizing our most impactful tasks, or what he calls the one thing. He poses this thought-provoking question: what one thing could you do so well that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
It's a great question to reflect on, isn't it? It challenges us to identify our highest leverage points, those areas where a small amount of effort can yield significant results.
He gives the example of preparing for a big presentation. Instead of trying to perfect every slide and memorize every word, he focuses on mastering the opening and closing sections, believing that if he can nail those key moments, the rest of the presentation will flow more naturally.
It's about identifying the most crucial elements and focusing your energy on those instead of getting bogged down in less important details.
Exactly. It's about finding the 20% that will give you 80% of the results. And this principle can be applied to any area of life, from launching a business to writing a book to simply decluttering your home.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into focus and productivity, we want to leave you with that final thought-provoking question. What's your one thing? What could you focus on that would have the biggest positive impact on your life?
Take some time to reflect on that and see where it leads you. You might be surprised at what you discover.